From the Stark family's brutal murders to Jon Snow's shocking betrayal, here are the saddest Game of Thrones moments that crushed fans everywhere. Ned Stark's execution. Ned Stark never wanted to be the king's hand, but when Robert Baratheon asked his old friend to stand by his side, Ned could not refuse.
You helped me win the Iron Throne, now help me keep the damn thing.
But once he reached King's Landing and found out the previous hand had been investigating the royal children, he knew something was fishy. So he decided to find out the truth, searching for clues in the Book of Family Histories and visiting several of Robert's bastards. Ned realized that Robert's blonde-haired children with Cersei weren't his.
I love your children.
With all my heart.
No more than I love mine.
And they're all Jaime's.
Thank the gods.
Ned wanted to tell Robert right away, but he was away on a hunting trip, and that's when the fates turned in Cersei's favor. Robert returned terribly wounded. By the time Ned saw him, he was on his deathbed. Ned sent a raven to Stannis Baratheon, urging him to claim the throne. He also trusted Peter Baelish to control the City Watch when Stannis arrived. But when the time came, Peter turned the Gold Cloaks against him, killed his men, and handed him over to Cersei.
I did warn you not to trust me.
Locked in the dungeons, Ned faced an impossible choice. He could die with honor or confess to betraying the king to save his daughters. For their sake, he swallowed his pride and publicly confessed, believing he'd be sent to the wall. But Joffrey had other plans. Against the advice of both Cersei and his advisors, Joffrey ordered Ned's execution.
So long as I am your king, treason shall never go unpunished. Sir Ilyn, bring me his head.
Sansa screamed for her father's life, while Arya pushed through the crowd to reach him. Ned was forced to his knees as both girls watched in horror. Yoren from the Night's Watch saw Arya moving slowly towards Ned and stopped her in her tracks, trying to protect her, and covered her eyes just as the sword fell on Ned's head. In a single moment, the Stark girls' lives were shattered, their father dead, their home far away, and no one left to protect them. To make matters worse, Sansa was left at Joffrey's mercy, who took extreme pleasure in torturing her. One of his cruelest acts, Joffrey forced Sansa to look at her father's head raised on a spike to hear her scream and cry, but Sansa never gave him the satisfaction. Cersei silently watched Ned's daughter being tortured. Shireen Baratheon's sacrifice. Shireen Baratheon was the only daughter of Stannis Baratheon, and ever since she'd survived grayscale as a child, her father was especially close to her. Shireen also loved and trusted her father blindly. But for Stannis, it was more important to be a king than a father. He believed he was the true heir of Westeros after King Robert, but after losing most of his ships and soldiers in a failed attack, he knew he needed more men, powerful supporters, and a safe base to regain control. So he sailed north to claim Winterfell, but the weather suddenly turned for the worse, and a snowstorm delayed Stannis. Melisandre, who had been guiding Stannis to his destiny from the beginning, reminded him that the fire god needed another sacrifice. With Gendry nowhere to be found, the only true Baratheon left was Shireen. Stannis was disgusted by the idea because he loved her too much. But after Ramsay and his soldiers destroyed the food tents and killed his horses, he started to become desperate. So, he visited his daughter and explained how a man must fulfill his destiny, no matter how much he hated it.
It doesn't matter. I want to help you.
Later, she was forcefully tied to a pyre under Melisandre's watch. Shireen screamed for her father, thinking that he would save her from this madness, but when Stannis came in front of her, he did nothing to help.
It's what the Lord wants. It's a good thing. A great thing.
She continued to scream and beg while Melisandre chanted to the Lord of Light. Shireen finally called out to her mother, who had never loved her, and in a surprising turn of events, Selyse Baratheon realized her mistake. She ran towards her daughter, just as Melisandre lit the pyre, but the other men grabbed her arms to stop her. The girl's painful screams filled the air as the flames consumed her. Stannis closed his eyes, unable to watch the horrifying sacrifice, not knowing that he had killed his daughter for nothing and would lose the battle later. But it wasn't just Shireen who endured a heartbreaking betrayal. The Starks faced it too, the hands of both the Freys and Boltons. The Red Wedding. Robb Stark promised to marry one of Walder Frey's daughters if he let them cross the twins during the War of the Five Kings. But Robb met another girl, Talissa on the battlefield and chose love over his promise to Walder Frey.
Walder Frey is a dangerous man to cross.
I know that.
And you mean to do it anyway?
I love her.
However, this betrayal angered Walder, and he refused to support Robb in the war any further. By this point, Robb's mission was failing, so Catelyn convinced Robb to have Edmure Tully marry one of Walder's daughters as a peace gesture. Robb agreed, and so did Walder Frey, but deep down, Walder wanted revenge. The Starks family arrived, and everything seemed normal until Catelyn noticed Black Walder silently closing the door of the Great Wall. But before she could understand what was happening, Walder held up his hand to stop the music and spoke to Robb.
Your Grace, I feel I've been remiss in my duties. My king has married, and I owe my new queen a wedding gift.
At that moment, Roose Bolton gave Catelyn a strange look, and when she glanced down, she saw his armor, and it suddenly became clear to her that the wedding was a trap for her family. She slapped Roose across the face and shouted to warn Robb, but it was far too late. Walder gave his men the signal to begin the killing, and just then, Lothar Frey approached Talissa from behind and stabbed her pregnant belly repeatedly. Both Talissa and her unborn child died instantly. The musicians threw their instruments aside and picked up crossbows to shoot at Robb and the Northerners in the main hall. The Frey and Bolton men, positioned behind the Stark soldiers, picked off the survivors. Robb was badly injured, but even so, he crawled towards Talissa and held her close. Catelyn, who had hidden underneath a table, grabbed Walder's 8th wife and put a knife to her throat.
Let him go, or I will cut your wife's throat.
I'll find another.
Robb, who was visibly shaken, slowly got up and called out to his mother, but Roose stepped in front of him and said,
Lannisters send their regards.
And stabbed him through the heart. Robb fell to the ground and died next to his wife. Overcome by grief and anger, Catelyn slit the girl's throat and let out a loud, painful cry as her own throat was slit by the enemy. Hodor's story. Hodor was born and raised in Winterfell, and even though he was mentally disabled, the Starks kept him employed with simple work. When Bran became paralyzed, Hodor became his caregiver, as he was the only one strong enough to carry him around. From helping him escape Winterfell to defending him against Locke and the Night's Watch rebels at Craster's Keep, he always protected Bran, and even joined his quest to find the Three-Eyed Raven. After finding the cave, Bran spent months learning how to see the past, present, and future, but he never imagined that he'd look into Hodor's past and change his future for the worse. In one of his visions, he saw Hodor as a young boy named Willis, who was actually a horse keeper working at Winterfell.
Willis, come here.
That boy was not simple-minded, was liked by everyone around him, including Lyanna, Benjen, and Ned Stark. And in a strange turn of events, Bran touched a weirwood while the Three-Eyed Raven was sleeping, accidentally letting the Night King mark him.
He touched you. He knows you're here. He'll come for you.
But he can't get in.
He can now.
This broke the cave's magic protection, allowing the White Walkers and thousands of Whites to attack them.
Help me!
Hodor stepped up once again, this time holding the back exit of the cave so Bran and Meera could escape. During the attack, Bran entered young Willis's mind, linking the present-day Hodor with his younger self. The young boy could hear Meera shouting, "Hold the door!" while watching his future self die.
Hold the door!
This broke Willis's mind, and he collapsed, seizing, screaming, "Hold the door!" over and over until the words slurred into a single tragic name.
Hodor! Hodor! Hodor!
Meanwhile, in the present, Hodor obeyed and held the door shut against the undead horde, sacrificing himself so Bran and Meera could escape. His entire life, every bit of pain and his mysterious condition had been leading to that single moment of heartbreaking bravery. Hodor gave up his life for Bran, but Tyrion's own family drove him to murder. Tyrion forced to kill Shae. Of all the love stories in Game of Thrones, Tyrion and Shae's was probably the most messy. Shae met Tyrion as a prostitute, but the two became attached enough for Tyrion to sneak her into King's Landing as Sansa's handmaiden. But things turned ugly when Tywin forced Tyrion to marry Sansa Stark, hoping to secure the North for House Lannister. Tyrion gave in, but he still loved Shae. Shae was extremely hurt and jealous of Tyrion's marriage, and, despite his promises, couldn't shake off the doubt.
We'll fight them together, it's like you said. I am yours and you're mine.
Meanwhile, the capital was becoming more dangerous for her, as both Tywin and Cersei were trying to use her against Tyrion. So, in an attempt to send her away from King's Landing for her own safety, Tyrion pretended that he didn't care for her, just to protect her.
Sansa is fit to bear my children, and you are not. I can't be in love with a whore. I can't have children with a whore. How many men have you been with? 500, 5,000?
But Shae saw it as betrayal and returned to testify against Tyrion in Joffrey's murder. Tyrion never imagined the only person he ever loved and protected would betray him this way.
Shae. Please don't.
I am a whore. Remember?
Shae claimed Tyrion and Sansa had secretly plotted Joffrey's murder in court, leaving Tyrion completely shocked. He knew it was over.
Admit you poisoned the king.
No. Of that I'm innocent. I'm guilty of a far more monstrous crime. I'm guilty of being a dwarf.
So he demanded a trial by combat, choosing Oberyn Martell as his champion against the Mountain. The Red Viper of Dawn had almost won, stabbing the Mountain in the chest and bringing him to the ground. But Oberyn kept dancing around him, forcing the Mountain to confess to killing Oberyn's sister. The Mountain found his chance and pulled him down, crushing Oberyn's skull with his bare hands. On the night of his execution, Jaime set him free, urging him to leave the capital with Varys. However, he wanted to confront his father one last time before leaving. But when he got to his chamber, he saw Shae in his father's bed.
Tywin.
And that snapped something inside her. She called out, thinking it was Tywin, but as soon as she saw Tyrion, she grabbed a dagger to defend herself, but Tyrion was quicker. Wrapping the golden chain he'd given her as a present around her neck, he continued to strangle her until she stopped moving. Tyrion was heartbroken from what he'd done and simply sat there in shock. He even apologized to Shae's dead body before hunting down and killing his father. Shae's end was tragic, but it was nothing compared to Theon's final stand. Theon's sacrifice. After his father's failed rebellion against the Iron Throne, Theon was taken as a ward at Winterfell, but after Ned was executed at King's Landing, he pledged his loyalty to his son, Robb, in the War of the Five Kings. However, when the time to show his loyalty finally came, he sided with his father in an attempt to take over the North. But fate played a cruel trick on him, leading his men to betray him.
Thought he'd never shut up. It was a good speech. Didn't want to interrupt.
Which eventually led to his capture by House Bolton. Once a respected ward, Theon was turned into a broken pet by Ramsay Bolton's cruelty and torture. He even cut off his genitals and sent them to his family in the Iron Islands.
But my father taught me, aim for their head.
But he wasn't the only one at Ramsay's mercy. Sansa Stark was also trapped in a marriage with him, abused and isolated in the home she grew up in. But Theon eventually broke free from Ramsay and redeemed himself by helping Sansa escape Winterfell and unite with her brother, Jon Snow. The two later retook Winterfell, defeating Ramsay and House Bolton.
Your words will disappear. Your house will disappear. Your name will disappear. All memory of you will disappear.
The biggest proof of his loyalty was when Bran was waiting in the Godswood as bait for the Night King. At that time, Theon stood guard with a small group of Ironborn to defend Bran with their lives. When the Whites eventually broke through the walls, one by one, all the men were slaughtered, but Theon stayed with Bran, fighting despite his fear. He stood his ground until he literally was the last man standing. He looked at Bran for the last time, who told him,
Theon, you're a good man. Thank you.
Theon wanted to hear those words ever since he'd betrayed the Starks. With tears in his eyes, he charged at the Night King with his spear, but the Night King stabbed him through the stomach, killing him instantly. Theon died for loyalty, but the Black Brothers turned on their own Lord Commander in the most brutal way. The Night Watcher's betrayal. After Jon Snow was elected the new Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, he spent time with the wildlings as part of his mission. This brought him closer to them, and he finally understood that they were simply Northerners who happened to be on the wrong side of the wall when it was first built. With the threat of the White Walkers looming, Jon decided to allow the wildlings to pass through the wall, following the massacre at Hardhome.
Open the gates.
But the Night's Watch still saw the wildlings as enemies. Jon was in his quarters when Ollie rushed inside with news of his uncle, Benjen Stark. Jon rushed outside, and Alistair Thorne started telling him about the wildling who brought information about Benjen, leading Jon to a group of black brothers huddled around a sign with the word traitor on it. Jon stared at it in shock, and as he turned around, Thorne drove a knife into him and said,
"For the Watch."
One by one, Jon's sworn brothers came forward and stabbed him. Jon couldn't believe the betrayal and eventually fell to his knees. But when Ollie stepped forwards, he thought for a second that the boy would help him.
For the Watch.
Heavily wounded, he collapsed on the ground. The men returned to their chambers, leaving Jon to bleed out alone in the cold night. Jon's brothers showed him no mercy, just like Cersei, whose cruelty towards Missandei ignited the wrath of the Mad Queen. Missandei's death. From the time Daenerys freed Missandei from the Masters of Astapor, the two were always together. After Daenerys defeated the Night King at Winterfell, she knew it was time to claim the Iron Throne from Cersei. So, she sailed to King's Landing with her armies, but Euron Greyjoy's fleet near Dragonstone attacked them. One of the giant scorpions struck Rhaegal, and as the wounded dragon fell, Daenerys was forced to flee with Drogon. And that's when all hell broke loose.
Get to the skiff. No!
Greyjoy's fleet destroyed Daenerys' ships, drowning countless unsullied soldiers. When the survivors finally washed ashore, Grey Worm searched desperately for Missandei, only to realize she'd been taken prisoner. Already broken from the loss of Rhaegal, Daenerys was filled with anger at the thought of her closest friend in enemy hands. She gathered her forces and marched to the gates of King's Landing, demanding Cersei release Missandei.
Queen Daenerys demands Cersei's unconditional surrender and the immediate release of Missandei of North.
But Cersei never planned to bow down. Ignoring Tyrion's pleas to think about her unborn child and Daenerys' unavoidable victory, she turned to Missandei and coldly ordered her to speak her last words. Missandei looked at Grey Worm first, then at the queen who had given her freedom. With steady determination, she spoke a single word that would seal the city's fate.
Dracarys!
The mountain approached Missandei from behind and removed her head in one violent strike. Grey Worm turned away from the horrific scene, but Daenerys stood frozen, staring as her dearest friend's lifeless body fell down the walls of the Red Keep. Missandei's cruel death changed Daenerys irrevocably, but she wasn't the only one who lost someone they loved. Ygritte's death in Jon's arms. Ygritte was a wildling woman of the Free Folk. She was clever, strong, and loyal to her people. She first met Jon Snow while he was on a Night's Watch mission, far beyond the Wall. But that meeting was anything but romantic, as Qohorin Halfhand had caught Ygritte.
What's your name?
Ygritte.
And ordered Jon to kill her. Jon hesitated because she was unarmed, but that's all she needed to make a quick escape. The next time the two met, Jon was pretending to join the wildlings to enter their ranks secretly. Ygritte teased and challenged him constantly, making fun of his vows of celibacy. But she also showed him another side of life, what it meant to live free, without kneeling to lords or kings.
How old are you, boy?
I'm a man of the Night's Watch.
You're a boy who's never been with a girl.
Their relationship became stronger over time, but Jon's sense of duty was stronger than their love, and he returned to the Night's Watch. Ygritte felt betrayed and heartbroken, so when Mance Rayder gathered his men to storm the wall, she joined the attack. When the wildlings finally attacked the Watchers on the wall, Ygritte was on the front lines with her bow in hand. Being one of the best archers among the Free Folk, she rained down arrows on the Black Brothers, killing several of them with her deadly accuracy. But when she finally spotted Jon on the battlefield, she hesitated despite her anger. Unfortunately, that pause turned deadly for her. Someone suddenly shot an arrow through her heart. Jon, who was frozen in place by shock and grief, turned to see Ollie, the young boy whose family had been killed by wildlings, holding the bow. The young boy nodded, thinking he'd saved Jon, but that was far from the truth. Jon rushed towards Ygritte as she began to collapse in his arms.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
And with those final words, Ygritte was gone. Which of these Game of Thrones deaths shook you the most? Tell us in the comments, and stay tuned for more videos. See you next time.